All right, welcome to the second video in the Mental Health Foundations playlist here on the Your Mental Health Mentor YouTube channel. If you haven't already, make sure you watch the first video in this playlist that breaks down what mental health even is. It's only 6 minutes, so make sure you give it a watch before this one, so it'll help you understand some of the Katie terminology. All right, so now that we've identified what mental health even is, we're kind of left with the question, all right, now, how do we improve it? Well, that leads us to our topic of today, self-awareness. Self-awareness is so important because just like I mentioned in the last video, we can't change what we don't notice. All right, so what does self-awareness even mean? And no, it's not your name, your birthday, your eye color. The way I explained mental health before was the quality of your inner world. Now, when it comes to self-awareness, think about self-awareness to be the process of getting to know your inner world. Self-awareness gives us the guidance to explore our mental health. So our goal here is to simply recognize and eventually understand our own thoughts, emotions, habits, behaviors, motivations, strengths, and patterns. Personally, when I started my mental health journey years ago, I felt kind of lost in this big world of mental health when I was just trying to heal from my depression. There were so many tools, concepts, and things out there to look at, but I just didn't even know where to start. And I'm here to tell you that self-awareness is the perfect starting point. Self-awareness was what allowed me to eventually understand myself and learn what I needed to truly create a life that thrives. All right, this is a hard truth that you probably need to hear. If you are not an expert in self-awareness, then you are likely living on autopilot. The truth is, most people are living their lives based on habit and reaction. And self-awareness is the tool that allows us to shift into intentional, deliberate decision making. Now, before we dive super deep, I want you to know that the key here is to simply notice without judgment. So do your best and create awareness around where judgment comes up, because this will be important for when we're moving forward and doing deeper dives into healing. So just remember to be kind to yourself within this whole process. I want to point out just the difference when it comes to noticing our thoughts and being able to observe how we're feeling within all of it. An example of awareness looks like, I'm feeling sad today. An example of judgment looks like, why can't I just be happy? I want you to pause for a quick second. You get up and you look in the mirror every day. You decide what you're gonna wear. You decide what shoes you like, how to do your hair. You know your outer self like the back of your hand. But how well do you really know your inner self? I'll be honest, it can feel a lot easier to just live on autopilot and not focus on our inner selves. Because as humans, we have convinced ourselves that change is scary. Remember, you can't change what you don't notice. So we have to start looking. Awareness always comes before change. I'll give you a personal example. I used to hate being alone. I was living on autopilot and I would react when plans fell through and I was left alone. Now, the habit that came with that was I would spiral. For me, that looked like a mind space full of judgmental thoughts and heavy sadness and frustration. Now, what self-awareness was able to do for me was allowed me to get curious and actually question, why was I spiraling? Why was I reacting to my plans falling through? And that led me to understanding that I didn't like being alone. So once I understood that, I started asking myself, well, why? And when it came to having depression, I was afraid of being left alone with my own thoughts. So once I gave myself time to digest all of this, ask myself more questions to really understand what was going on within me and my mental health, I found myself believing in this statement, I cannot be alone. It led me into the beautiful opportunity to challenge that belief that I had. And let me tell you, being able to grow the confidence to step out of my comfort zone and challenge this belief that I couldn't be alone made me do some really, really beautiful things in life. And don't get me wrong, this was not an overnight change. This was a process that took me time to really break down and understand and develop the confidence to actually take action. But after some time, I had the confidence to actually remove friendships that were no longer serving me, end a toxic relationship, move into an apartment all by myself. And after a couple years of living alone and indulging in this time to actually pour into my growth, I ended up leaving my apartment to go backpacking through Greece by myself for 3 months. That is something that I never thought that I would be able to do. But because I had self-awareness, this is the ripple effect that it gave me in my life. So trust me when I say that self-awareness is a beautiful first step to growth. All right, let me give you a quick visual. I want you to picture an iceberg. On the tip of the iceberg, we have the behaviors and the experience that you're going through. Now below is where everything lies. This is where we have our self-image, our beliefs, our habits, the stories we tell ourselves, and patterns in our life. The thing is that most times people often try to change what they can see on the surface without even looking beneath the surface. I want to introduce the topic of getting curious to you. This is a really, really important part of self-awareness. Within noticing everything within self-awareness, I want you to get super curious about why things are happening. Ask questions driven by curiosity. For example, why does this bother me? Or why did I react that way? And if you want to go even a little bit deeper, you can ask yourself, what do I believe to be true about blank? And a supporting question, where did that belief come from? This type of curiosity encourages what's called metacognition. And this is simply the process of thinking about your own thinking. Within this comes self-awareness. And this is where we can build that skill and develop the ability to grow and self-regulate. All right, a little note about this next part. If this goes over your head, do not worry about it. I want you to try and understand, but if it's not something you quite grasp, no worries. This is going to be something that we're talking about a lot moving forward. But get this, you are a fabulous author and you don't even know it. While you're developing self-awareness, you're going to notice that there are some stories that you're telling yourself over and over again. Now, these actually develop from a belief or an experience, or your parents or your grandparents, but that's for another playlist. Now we use this inner narrative to convince ourselves that this belief is true. And we do this for one simple reason: safety. Our brains are literally wired to keep us away from danger. So it comes up with these stories, true or not, to keep us from doing something scary or unsafe. And this is what develops our comfort zone. I'll give you an example. Let's say when you were in elementary school, you raised your hand to answer a question and you got the question wrong. Let's say the whole class is laughing at you and you feel super embarrassed. Now, this deep feeling of embarrassment, we feel it in our bodies, and it actually travels up to a part of our brain called the amygdala, which is where the brain flags this experience as unsafe. And this is where these stories, this inner narrative comes from. And this is why self-awareness is so important, because if we don't notice it right in this moment or moving forward, it can actually build over time and create this way bigger fear that started from something a little bit smaller. Let me break this down for you. So if suddenly you have this bit of a fear for raising your hand in class, suddenly you stop doing it, because you don't want to feel embarrassed again. But what about the moments where you're called on by your teacher? So let me break this down for you. You don't want to feel embarrassed again. So what do you start doing in your head? You start telling yourself, oh, if I raise my hand again, I might feel embarrassed. I don't want to feel embarrassed. What if I get the answer wrong? You start saying all of these things in your head, and it starts to develop these stories that you repeat to yourself in scenarios where you end up holding yourself back. Now, if this sticks with you and you don't have the awareness to do anything about it, then it actually develops over time. So if you stop putting your hand up in class, you start getting called on. So when the teacher calls you out and asks for an answer, you get that same feeling in your gut. You're scared of saying the wrong answer. You're scared if people are gonna laugh at you. You're scared of that feeling of embarrassment. So then the next time that rolls around that the teacher's gonna call your name, you start shrinking in your seat. You start not making eye contact. And then what stories come along with that? Oh no, if the teacher picks me, I'm gonna feel embarrassed. I'm gonna get the answer wrong. You start developing this next level story. So the longer that goes on, the deeper the fear gets. And then when you get to high school and you have a project where you have to do public speaking, it ends up reminding you of that time you felt super embarrassed when you shared something with the class and they all laughed at you. You don't want to feel that way again. So you start telling yourself this story of, oh no, if I stand up here and I have to speak in front of everyone, if I get something wrong, they're all gonna laugh at me. I'm gonna feel so embarrassed. So then it develops into this fear of public speaking. And we know it's not gonna be the last time that you have to speak in front of either a group of people or a room of people or online. So then you start to feel that fear every time that those situations come up and that story evolves. Well, what if I speak my mind and people laugh at me, or they think that I'm wrong, or they think my ideas are just silly? And then life goes on. There's more experiences, more fear, the more that story develops. And suddenly you have a fear around sharing your ideas or sharing your story or just sharing what's on your mind. So the more you experience that feeling and that fear and hold yourself back, the worse that feeling will get, because you're not practicing, you're not growing, you're holding yourself back from that. And this can end up developing into something way stronger, like even sharing your voice or speaking out. So you can see how something so small that we didn't have awareness over, that we just reacted to, could build into something in our adult lives that, we can hold on to and have these fear of things and be telling ourselves these stories for years. So this is why I want you to be so careful and get curious. Get so curious about where these stories have come from and if they are even true. I'll be completely honest with you. Most of those stories, if they feel limiting in any way or might be coming from a place of fear, then these stories are likely lies. And you deserve to know that those stories are not true. All right, the last thing you need to know about in the world of self-awareness is triggers. All right, to help us understand what a trigger really is, I'm going to reference a water gun for a minute. In order for water to actually come out of the spout of the gun, we need to pull the trigger. That's what makes the water come out. So for that reaction to happen, there has to be some type of trigger. Same goes in the topic of self-awareness. Developing self-awareness around our triggers can give us so much to work with. It can teach us so much about ourselves and about our mind and about our mental health as a whole. Understanding our triggers can help us dig deeper into our beliefs, those stories that we're telling ourselves, some past experiences, and even what's going on in our bodies. Remember, question it. Get super curious. Ask yourself, why did the trigger make me the reaction? And take the statement and get even deeper with it. Once you have that statement, ask yourself, what is this trying to teach me? And remember, the goal here is not to change who we are. What we're actually doing is coming back to ourselves, because we are all beautiful, unique, divine souls that have limitless capabilities. So coming back to ourselves always starts with self-awareness. So if you've seen my videos before, you know that I love to give some type of activity that you can practice carrying through the week until the next video comes out on Mental Health Monday. Now, these activities I give to you to help you actually build the practices in your own world on your own. So don't think of this as homework. Think of this as growth work. Now, when it comes to growth work, there are 3 different types of people. The first group of people is probably just going to watch this video and not do any of these questions. The second group of people are going to do it, but minimally. They'll write down the questions and write down a few one-answer words and be done with it. Now, the third group of people are people like me, obsessed with the opportunity for growth. These are the people that go deep into these questions. They take their time to get the most out of their answers. My personal recommendation, be like the third group of people. I want you to get the most out of this, and that's gonna come from doing these activities. Because if you're just watching this once a week and you're not practicing any of it throughout the week, then you're probably not gonna be gaining as much as you could be. And I wanna see you mentally thriving. So here's the activity. What I'm gonna get you to do is answer 3 questions every night before you go to bed. So the first question is gonna be, what thought or story came up the most today? The second one is gonna be, what made me feel most alive today? And the third one is gonna be, what drained my energy today? So my group 3 people like me are going to do their best to have different answers for the last 2 questions. There's so much value in finding one thing that you love that's making you feel so good, or one thing that you might need to think about cutting out of your life. But it's so much better to be able to find multiple things to dig deep into. Now, for the first question, I understand that if there is one thing prominently coming up in your mind, or you're able to recognize one story that you repeat to yourself, I don't want you to think about finding a ton of these. I think that it's so valuable to be able to find at least one. So practice creating awareness around these things that are coming up every single day. Now, for my people who really want to thrive, remember when I said get curious and get super deep? Use this opportunity with these questions to get so deep. Go next level and ask yourself, why? When you can find something that's draining your energy or something that's making you feel alive, ask yourself why. Why does it make you feel so good? Why does it drain your energy? Get really deep, because once you have more information and you have more awareness around these ideas, then that's what's going to give you the most leverage for growth. Now, if you didn't already know, I am creating a series of videos to help you create a strong foundation for your mental health. So follow along every Mental Health Monday to continue your growth in the Mental Health Foundations playlist. I hope you got some value out of this video today, and I would absolutely love to hear your takeaways and your comments, or you can send me a DM on Instagram at Your Mental Health Mentor. But that's it for today. I'm Katie, your mental health mentor, and I'll see you next week.